Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. Richard Shimuka, who spoke to us about the Canadian order of jet planes from the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, was really quite interesting. And I think that, one of the comments that he made is that the Canadian government has actually made the right decision in the end, but he still lambasted them for lack of leadership and taking too long to make the decision. And I think, even though I agree with Richard, I think that's part of the problem that we have in our society today, is even when people make the right decision, we criticize them. And we don't say, congratulations for finally making the right decision and coming on board. And our politics, our community has become so partisan and so polarized that we criticize everything. And I'm criticizing Richard now, so that's probably, I'm a great example of my own problem. But I do think that one of the reasons why the government took so long is because it was a partisan issue. Because Stephen Harper and his government supported it originally, it was as if they had to oppose it. The Liberal government had to oppose it for a long time, even though, as Richard said, it was the right decision, has always been the right decision. And they finally came to the right decision. I think probably helped by the environment that military spending is more reasonably considered by the vast majority of the population today after the Russian invasion of Ukraine than it may have been previously. We are willing to accept some spending generally. I personally would have always, but I think generally the whole populace is willing to accept some spending now that they wouldn't have previously, which is bad. That actually the right decision is delayed because it's politically unfavorable, just because of the environment. And then the environment changes, and all of a sudden, the same decision that was always the right decision is now more politically appealing. Not even appealing. It's possible, I guess. And so you go ahead, which really calls, for me at least, into question whether leaders in our politics are leading or they're following. I would have thought that the whole reason why you want to be in politics and to get political capital is to lead. But too often it seems like it's following, and they can't do anything until such time as the populace is already there. And that's frustrating. I've got a couple of very interesting sessions coming up that are sort of in similar topics. Tomorrow, I've got a really interesting session with a gentleman I met this weekend at a funeral. A former retired general, Peter Holt is his name. And it turns out that he is in the Canadian Armed Forces, or at least was in the Canadian Armed Forces, the expert on Russian military vehicles and military strategy, particularly armored vehicles. And we ended up having this fascinating discussion about what the Russian military strategy was in Ukraine, what armaments they were using, how vulnerable they were, how ineffectual they were, and how poorly trained and poorly led the Russian army is. And that the Ukrainian army, far vastly outnumbered, is more ingenious, is more creative, is less order-driven, more democratic, more reasoned, more Western, more creative, and is coming up with some great solutions as to ways to undermine the Russian vastly superior initially effort, and to prove that just lots of munitions and lots of men in uniforms aren't necessarily the ways to victory. Strategy is, leadership is, smartness is, creativity is, etc. And it's a great lesson in war, and it's a great lesson in life. And I commend to you the discussion with retired General Peter Holt. It's interesting, and his life story is really quite fascinating. I had two really good interviews, I think, earlier in this week. On Monday, I had Rocco Rossi, the president and CEO of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, talking about a whole range of issues that are important to business, politics, the population of Ontario. We talked about nuclear energy. We talked about cars, electronic cars. We talked about affordable housing. We talked about a whole raft of issues that government has an impact on and the business has an impact on, and really set the scene for 2023. I then on Tuesday had a really interesting conversation with Sam Sabrajan, who is a wealth management expert on FTX and the demise of cryptocurrency, and particularly, obviously, FTX, and the era of CEOs that were bigger than life, celebrity CEOs, and that he suggests if a CEO becomes too celebrity, you might want to sell the stock. And that was interesting. And then we ended up getting onto a whole topic of markets and where markets are going in 2023, and where and how you can make money. And I thought it was a great way to position the start of the year. On Friday, I've got a really interesting author, Lauren Platt is her name, to talk about a book that she's just published called Heartbroken. And I tried to get out of her some sort of help, self-help suggestions on how to deal with breakups and being heartbroken and things like that. And it was almost as if she didn't think that was smart, that really the best way to deal with being heartbroken is to admit that your heart is broken and not dwell on it. But I think that she called it, be comfortable with it and think about it and consider it and philosophically contemplate it, which actually is probably the way that you learn and grow. And it's a really interesting conversation. So I commend that to you. So this week is interesting. Rocco Rossi on Monday about the Ontario economy. Sam Savrajan about the entire market, particularly cryptocurrency, but the balance of the market. Richard on Wednesday, Richard Shimoka talking about the Canadian purchase of jet airplanes. Thursday, retired General Peter Holt talking about Russian military strategy and Russian military vehicles. And Friday, Laura Platt, the book Heartbroken. We've all been heartbroken at different times. And so it's kind of interesting listening to someone who went through that experience and then wrote a book about it. That's my shows for this week. I hope you catch some of them. I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online at www.saga960am.ca. Thanks. Good night. Have a great week.